There are a lot of favorite books and movies that start out with someone turning a new leaf. They're starting something fresh. They're starting themselves fresh. They're starting a new life. One of my favorites recently is called Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt. Has anybody heard of this TV show? Yeah, we got one over here. Okay, a couple. It's a Netflix show, so it's not on TV. It's on Netflix. But it's about these women who were rescued from a bunker. So a guy posing as a clergy person abducted these women, held them in a bunker for years. And so the story begins when they're rescued. And now it's about them trying to find their way in a world that they come at completely new. And so Kimmy moves to New York and tries to figure out what she's going to do. And she takes an aptitude test at a community college to figure out what profession she would be really good at. And she got crossing guard. So she decides to go to community college to get a crossing guard degree. But I don't think that's the only one. I think a lot of our favorite shows, our favorite movies, our favorite books are about people trying to figure out who they are. Something has happened, and now they have to refigure out who they are, why they are, and where they are. When we are set free from something or when we turn a page, we sometimes don't know what to do next. We don't know where to go. Sometimes we don't know what we're even about, and we can get lost. This is the case with the Israelites this morning. They had been enslaved for so long that enslavement defined so much of their identity that as they wandered the wilderness, they started thinking back, well, maybe we should go back. Do you remember the wheat we had? Do you remember the protein that we had in Egypt? Yeah, it was back-breaking work. Yeah, we weren't paid. Yeah, we were slaves, but remember how secure our food situation was? That was a couple of weeks ago. And then Moses, via God, there was some manna, there was some quail, provisions for the Israelites. But their identity was so tied, their generational memory was so tied to that enslavement that it was difficult for them to figure out who they were, what they were about, and where they would be going. Slavery was all they knew for generations. And now what do they know? They know wandering. They know wandering. And when a nation doesn't have a defined purpose or standards for their living, if a community doesn't have a unified identity and vision, it can fracture. And that community can pursue things inauthentic to that community. I'm thinking of Charles, what's Heston? Something Heston. Charles Heston. I was born the same year as the ELCA. Charles Heston? Charleston Heston? Y'all know who I'm talking about? CH? I think about CH. And he goes up the mountain, right? And he comes down with these two tablets, and what does he find at the base of the mountain? He finds the Israelites worshiping a golden calf. He sees them worshiping a golden calf, he gets angry, and he throws those tablets on the ground and has to go get new ones. When a community doesn't have a defined vision or a defined standard for living with each other, they can pursue things inauthentic to that community, just like the Israelites pursued that worship of idols, even though God had just liberated them from slavery. Sometimes liberation leaves us with a little bit of longing, a little bit of lostness. For the Israelites, the word wilderness in which they were wandering seems an apt setting for their post-liberation wandering. They're aimless, they're unsure of their future, they're fearful of their present predicament, and these insecurities lead them to worship idols and equate that hardship that they're experiencing with God's abandonment. They equate their hardship with the thought that God has left them to die in the desert. Without purpose and vision, a community cannot live and thrive in the ways that God would wish to empower us to. And so giving the Israelites a sense of purpose and identity was the goal of our text today, of the 10 commandments. So from the mountain, Moses descends with these commandments, and guess what? They're not super practical as far as a law legalistic sort of way goes. They're not practical. And they're unlike any other laws that you'll find in the Old Testament. They don't have details for consequences, punishment. If I don't do this or if I do something contrary to this, what's going to happen to me? There's no punishment dictated in this text. As far as reparations go, because these things harm our neighbor, and when we break those laws in the Old Testament that harm our neighbor, there are ways to repair that relationship. But not in this text. This is not a practical text. These are not practical laws. And so what are these laws? These laws are the vision for the Israelite people. These laws are the unifying identity for the Israelite people. The first law, God, and you will have no other gods before me. God is their identity. God is their vision. And not just any God, but the liberating God. The God that led them out of Egypt and out of slavery. The God that gifted them with manna and quail when things got really hard. The God that does not abandon, even though they're worshiping a golden calf at the base of the mountain. When Moses finds them worshiping the golden calf, does God say, well, nope, that's it, nope. Moses goes up the mountain and gets a new set of tablets. God does not abandon God's people. And so the Israelites, while they are various and large in number, their identity is tied to these commandments. Their identity is tied to these impractical commandments, these impractical laws, this vision for how to live together. This vision for love, this vision for taking care of each other, this vision for God. In a couple of weeks, we're going to celebrate the 500th anniversary of the Reformation. We're going to remember Martin Luther and Katie Luther and all of those reformers. Philip Melanchthon, throw that name out there. Anybody know that name? Chances are slim. Philip Melanchthon was his partner, was the Greek professor at Wittenberg. He was the guy that took over the Augsburg Confessions, the Book of Concord, and wrote a bunch of the stuff when Martin Luther couldn't. The Reformation was a team effort, and it took a unified vision, a unified energy, a unified identity to get it done. Martin Luther wasn't the only one who tried to do those things, but Martin Luther wasn't burned at the stake like those other people were, and so he succeeded. There's something about working as a team, working as a community, working as a congregation that accomplishes God's vision. And so as we come up on this 500th anniversary of the Reformation, as we are empowered to remember how people critically engaged with their faith life, critically engaged with both doubts and questions as well as answers and searching and exploration, we are empowered to encounter our faith lives in the similar way. We are empowered to ask each other, who are we and what is God calling us to do? Who are we at the Lutheran Church of Mahomet looks very different than who are we at St. Matthew's Lutheran Church in Urbana. That's where my wife serves as pastor, P.S. We serve very different congregations, but we both live 15 minutes from our congregations. How can that be possible? How can we worship the same God? How can we be called Lutheran and yet be so different? Because who we are and what God is calling us to do at 410 East Andover Drive is very different than what they're calling those to do in Philo Road. And so in the next year, we are empowered to think critically about our faith. What is it that God is calling us to do? Not just me to do. What is God calling us to do as a community, as a nation, as a congregation? This is our call to think communally and to keep God as our identity. Who are we, and what are we called to do? Amen.